Hey, have you heard of the Bilderberg Group? I hope so, but how did they first get exposed? No, Alex Jones didn't first expose them. Not even Jim Tucker. How did the Bilderberg first get exposed, and who did it, and when? I had these questions, and in my investigations, instead of just reading a Wikipedia page, which is what most people do, or watching a YouTube video or a documentary film, I did what few people do. I bought a book, Jim Tucker's Bilderberg Diary. I have Daniel Estelin's book too, the Bilderberg Group, True Story of the Bilderberg Group, I'll get to later. But Jim Tucker has been chasing the Bilderberg Group since 1975, and in 2005, he wrote this incredible book cataloging his journeys and what he's discovered, what Bilderberg's done. Bunch of photos in here. Basically, Jim Tucker is sort of like a pre-Alex Jones, but he didn't have a video camera, he just had a still camera, and you can find all sorts of photos in here of his Bilderberg adventures. But how did Jim Tucker find out about them? How did we get to this point today? Jim Tucker explains it in his book, and Bilderberg Group was started in 1954 in Holland. You probably know this. If not, get out of the rock that you've been living under, get up to speed. So anyway, in 1957, a Pulitzer Prize winning columnist for the Associated Press and Scripps Howard News Service, this syndicated columnist named Westbrook Pegler, first wrote about them just a few years after they first started, 1954. Okay, so 1957, this guy wrote the first article about them, saying something very mysterious is going on when a strange assortment of 67 self-qualified polyglot designers and arbiters of economic and political fate of our Western world go into a secret huddle on an island of Brunswick, Georgia, and not a word gets into the popular press beyond a little routine AP story. These gumshoe superstate architects and monetary schemers were drawn from all NATO countries. The fact of this weird conclave is as spooky as any midnight meeting of a Ku Klux Klan in a piney woods. Would bound to be get known to the world eventually. Okay, so he already knows, calls them schemers. Looks like there was 67 of them back then. So he goes on to say here that how he got word of this. How did this guy figure this out? Well, looks like somebody just happened to come across that hotel, think that there was something weird going on, and gave this guy a tip about it. And so he says here, I got my first word from a reader who happened onto the St. Simon Island of Brunswick on her way to West Palm Beach. She wrote that the hotel on St. Simon was almost deserted, but when she commented on this, the clerk said the place had been alive with mysterious characters a few days earlier, and with Secret Service and FBI too. Now, Westbrook Pegler did not know their name, but he knew that there was some interesting meeting going on, and even tied them with the same cabal that launched the Federal Reserve, where he says here, Senator Aldrich of Rhode Island called this one into being. He was the father of Winthrop Aldrich. There have been many excited versions of the ancient hoedown on Jekyll Island in 1908, but relatively few have ever heard of it. So that was in 1957, and still today, few people have heard about the Jekyll Island secret meeting that launched the Federal Reserve private bank, right? So that's pretty interesting. So it looks like they had their meeting. Somebody happened to have just see it and thought it was weird, noticed something was suspicious, and like, you know, good citizens did, or maybe still some do, called her local newspaper and gave them a news tip. And so come along with another guy named Willis Carto. Now, Willis Carto in 1958, a year after Westbrook Pegler's article, founded Liberty Lobby, which published a newsletter called Liberty Lowdown that included a work exposing the Bilderberg Group. And I don't know exactly, it's weird, I need to talk to Jim Tucker about this to clarify this. So it looks like Willis Carto read Westbrook Pegler's column and then started Liberty Lobby and started investigating the Bilderberg Group the following year in 1958. But I'm not sure about that, because in Jim Tucker's diary he has an article from Willis Carto, which may be the first article that Willis Carto did. And if this is the case, then 20 years went by before he discovered Westbrook Pegler's article in the Bilderberg Group. So an article titled Secret World Conference 1975 in Willis Carto's newsletter explained the 1975 meeting took place against the background of the most massive exposure of the Bilderbergers had ever suffered. In 1974, the meeting was in Megavie, France. A Liberty Lobby reporter was there, and although no news whatsoever of this important gathering was carried by the Associated Press, United Press International, or my newspaper in the U.S., or any newspaper in the U.S., Liberty Lobby alerted millions of Americans to the fact through the media of its publication and radio programs. Because of these efforts, numerous editors of newspapers asked AP and UPI about previous Bilderberg meetings and demanded coverage of later ones. Now, this is where Jim Tucker comes in 1975. Looks like Jim Tucker was hired by Willis Carto to work on his newspaper, and that's how Jim Tucker learned about it. As he writes in his diary here, had it not been for Willis Carto, who hired me as the editor of the Spotlight and then put me on the track of Bilderberg, I would probably, almost assuredly, never have heard the word Bilderberg. Having had the opportunity through Carto's good offices as founder of Liberty Lobby, publisher of the Spotlight, to begin what ultimately proved to be a generation of worldwide Bilderberg hunting, I was able to bring news about Bilderberg literally to millions of folks who would, like myself, have otherwise remained in the dark about these globalist schemers. I first learned about the Bilderberg Group in 2005 when I was searching file sharing networks like BearShare and LimeWire for films on the New World Order, and I happened to come across a video by this total whitewasher shill John Ronson, this British sort of a satirist and a humorist, basically, who followed Jim Tucker around to the Bilderberg meeting to try to just, make fun of him and laugh at conspiracy theorists and see how crazy he was. But John Ronson actually had to admit that Jim Tucker was right. And you can find that now on YouTube. Obviously, it's a click away for those people who don't even remember back into the early 2000s or who were too young to be caring about this sorts of material. It's we sort of take advantage or take for granted now how easy it is to just a click of a button to watch a documentary film. But before, you just sit there and download it for a few hours and search the file sharing networks, and some people would put fake names on fake videos. You weren't sure what you were getting. It was a mess. So that's how I found out about them. And then I figured, since Jim Tucker is the world's foremost expert on them, I should probably buy Jim Tucker's book. And it's fantastic. I would highly recommend it. Now, there's another popular book about the Bilderberg Group by Daniel Estulin called The True Story of the Bilderberg Group. And while this is sold apparently 2 million copies in Europe, allegedly, according to the publisher, that's what I read, and then they had printed 70,000 copies in America. This is one of the highest ranked books on Amazon still. It's like super high ranking book. But I would recommend Jim Tucker's book for a couple reasons. Jim Tucker's book is just more straightforward. Daniel Estulin's writing style is a little cheesy. It's a little storytelling, kind of a storytelling. For example, instead of just breaking it down what it is, he says here, putting on his leather gloves, he pressed the elevator button. A blue light shone through its transparent surface. I could hear the whistling sounds of the hydraulic lift speeding towards us from the bowels of the building 6 levels per second. I turned towards my informant. When will I see you next? So he tries to make it like it's this spy novel, sort of, like he's telling a story. I'd rather just have facts, just give it like it is. But the book's pretty good. He's got a lot of photos. Basically, Daniel Estulin was a photographer, and there's a million photos in his book of people at the Bilderberg Group, because he's been tracking them for quite a while. But something doesn't sit well with me in this book, in the fact, I don't want to disrespect Daniel Estulin or his work, but he writes in here how he thought that the Bilderberg Group tried to assassinate him by tampering with an elevator. Let me just read this for you. The floor, I muttered, barely perceiving. Where is the floor? We have to get out of here, said the source. Someone has jimmied the system. They have been expecting you. Listen, he said, don't take the elevator. It isn't safe. Walk down the stairs and call the police. When you get here, I'll take advantage of the moment and take the elevator down to the garage. Go, do it now. Okay, so then he continues here. What happened was Daniel Esteban and this source of his were in the hotel where Bilderberg was going to take place, and they went down somewhere. They went to get into an elevator, and apparently when the doors opened, there was no floor in the elevator. Okay, and so he construed that as the Bilderberg Group was trying to assassinate him that way, saying here, you know, son, you're lucky to be alive. The policeman stood with his knees opened, his shoe tips pointing outward. Usually only blind people survive those situations. A blind man would never step into an elevator without checking to see if it was there. Most of us take it for granted. When the mafia wants someone rubbed out, this is one of their preferred methods. Okay? That's on page 12 of Daniel Westland's book. So, can anybody just not be crazy and not be full of crap and not be delusional, like when you're searching for weird stuff like the Bilderberg Group? I mean, really, Daniel? The Bilderberg Group tried to assassinate you by taking the floor out of an elevator? You know, I don't remember what country this was in, but I'm sure that some countries don't have building codes like America does. So that's really the only cheesy part. Daniel Weston also claims that some source of his found him because Daniel Weston's family has intelligence ties, which could be true. But the almost getting assassinated by the elevator was, you know, kind of casts a dark cloud over the rest of his book, I'm sorry to say, which I guess the rest of his book's pretty accurate. And I think he leaves the sleuth style narrative. He kind of drops that after the first few chapters. But Jim Tucker's book, just straightforward, starting from 1975. And then I guess Jim Tucker started personally traveling out to the Bilderberg Group meetings in 1983. So he was supervising coverage from 1975 to 1983. And then the diary goes into extreme detail starting in 1983, where the Bilderberg meetings were, what they talked about. Jim Tucker has sources in the Bilderberg Group, okay, that have been very accurate. And for example, in 2002, all the mainstream media was saying that the war in Iraq was going to start in the spring or fall of 2002. Bilderberg said, nope, it's not till 2003. That's what Jim Tucker's sources said. And then, of course, the war in Iraq didn't start until 2003. And so there's a lot of photos in here, a lot of really good information, just straight to the point. And so I would highly recommend it. So that's kind of a brief overview of how Bilderberg got exposed. It's just weird that I'm actually interested in this because I hated history class when I was in school. And I've come to learn it, so to love it. So that's basically how it got discovered, who discovered it, the chain of people sort of leading up to today. So thought maybe some people would be interested in that. I'm Mark Dice. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my videos. Check out my books on Amazon.com, Kindle, or Nook, and more videos coming soon.